Superheroes on and off the ice. I will get into what that means in a minute, but first, welcome to Plot Twists and Hat Tricks. I'm Amanda, hockey analysis, book obsession. You miss 100% of the pages you don't read. This is the 8th episode. Here at Plot Twists and Hat Tricks, the episodes are broken down into 3 segments or periods. The first period is always hockey analysis. Could be about the NHL, could be about the WHL. You'll have to tune in to find out. The second period is where I talk about a book. There are never any spoilers for the book being talked about, like ever. Finally, we have the third period, which, similar to the game of hockey, anything can happen. So I consider it my wild card, and it changes every week. Well, let's lace up those skates and take the ice. The first period is about to start. So I am sorry to report that there is no breaking news to start off this episode. However, I have some personal news to share. So I have a knee injury that has essentially been on and off getting re-injured for about 2 years now. I recently went to go see a surgeon, and he let me know that, hey, let's do an exploratory knee scope. So with that, I am going to be recording 3 episodes this weekend. So if there is any breaking news, I will most likely post about it on social media, but they will not be covered in the episode. So make sure you go and follow me on Instagram and TikTok. The episodes being recorded are going to be the final 2 episodes of our tour through the NHL, and then there's a bonus episode on a series I want to start in the future. So with all that being said, let's take a look at the Metro division and see why it is one of my favorite divisions to watch. Let's start off with the Carolina Hurricanes. Obviously, they won the Stanley Cup in 2026, which is this year. I had an entire first period segment dedicated to the Hurricanes, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about them, because if you're not a Hurricanes fan, you are probably so tired of hearing about them. But I do want to highlight some notable players. Again, more information on these players are, I believe, in the first episode of this podcast. So go back and re-listen to the first episode where you get a deeper dive into why the Hurricanes won the Stanley Cup this season. So the notable players I'd like to mention is Jacob Slavin. He is a defenseman. He's also from Colorado, so holds a special place in my heart. It was really fun to watch him grow up playing hockey. Then we have Seth Jarvis, who he just continues to post some of the most fun pictures, and his group of friends that he's had for, I believe, since he was a kid is just so heartwarming. That's all I can say about it. Then we have Taylor Hall, who he was a blockbuster trade coming over to Carolina, and he finally got a cup. And then finally, we have Brandon Bossy, who came in clutch during the playoffs when Frederik Andersen got hurt and was no longer able to play. The news on that is a little controversial. Some news sites will say, yes, Andersen got hurt. Others say, no, he didn't get hurt, or he was on injury watch. It really depends on which media outlet you look at. But let's just say he came in relief for Frederik Andersen, and he helped them win that cup. So, like I said, I'm not going to spend too much time. I talked more about funny things for the Hurricanes. All the players mentioned, fantastic players, definitely players you want to watch. And keep an eye out for them. The next team I have is the Pittsburgh Penguins. So the Pittsburgh Penguins is my second favorite team in the NHL, obviously following the Colorado Avalanche. I am even wearing my Pittsburgh Penguins shirt. It is a Sidney Crosby shirt for today's episode. So yeah, I would say pretty big Penguins fan. I would say that I wouldn't say I'm a bandwagon fan by any means. I started liking the Penguins when Crosby was drafted, and to show my age, I was like 8 or 9 years old. So by 8 or 9 year old logic, Sidney Crosby just being God's gift to hockey at the time was an instant reason for me to become a fan of the Penguins. Also take into account that the Avalanche were kind of rebuilding their team. We were seeing retirements of a lot of big name players, and especially at that age, you can only watch your favorite team lose so many games until you're like, I want to watch a team that's winning. And again, that is a small child logic. The fun fact that I have for the Pittsburgh Penguins this week is that they cut a multi-year drought of not making the playoffs. This was absolutely huge. They have been on the bubble for a little bit, but just barely missing playoffs. And for a team that has such a recognizable roster and with so many notable players, it was really hard to do this particular segment for notable players. But knowing that those players are starting to potentially look into retirement is kind of leading the organization to be like, okay, we are in rebuild mode. So to see them make the playoffs in rebuild mode, even though they still do have those very well-known players, is a testament to how Kyle Dubas is running the team, and how, although I did not agree at the time, the replacement of Mike Sullivan as head coach is proving to be a risk that was worth it in the end. So let's talk about some notable players. Of course, we have Sid, no longer the kid, Crosby. He is the captain of the team. At the time he was crowned captain, he was the youngest captain in the NHL. That has since been dethroned, I believe, by Gabriel Landeskog and even Connor McDavid. But Sidney Crosby's style of play, man, I could talk about his style of play for probably hours, but I'll spare you all and just talk a little bit about what I love about him. Because I am actually planning in the future to release an episode on the Sidney Crosby versus Alexander Ovechkin debate, where I will then get to dive in a little bit deeper into why I love Sidney Crosby as much as I do as a player. But essentially, one of the main things I love about Sidney Crosby is that he makes the players around him better. Yes, could he do it all by himself? Absolutely. But he doesn't. Instead, he makes that pass to give somebody else a goal. He's a playmaker. And, I mean, look at Jake Gensel. I'm convinced that Jake Gensel would not have as much success as he does, as fast as he did, if he did not have Crosby as a mentor. Now, I'm not saying that Jake Gensel would not have the success that he does now. I just don't think we would have seen it as fast as we did with Crosby's leadership. The next player to mention is Evgeny Malkin, otherwise known as Gino. So this is part of the three-headed monster that is known around Pittsburgh. And the three-headed monster is Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and then Chris Letang. Reason being is because they all came in the league around the same time. So the significance of Evgeny Malkin is he seems to always be a little bit in Crosby's shadow, which is kind of hilarious because if you look at the height difference, Gino is huge and Crosby's like average height. But he's a great playmaker. He makes a pass. He can be an enforcer when he needs to. Him and Crosby working together as captain and alternate captain is just great teamwork, and you can really see how they feed off of each other. When Crosby was out for a year under concussion protocol, Gino was able to take the reins, and where the team might not have performed as well as they would have with Crosby, they still had notable performances. The next player is the third part of the three-headed monster in Chris Letang. I have heard his nickname as Tanger. He is a defenseman, and I think that he is the start of changing how the defensemen play in the league. So I'll get into this when I do a little bit more of an analysis on the Colorado Avalanche and how they were built. But in my opinion, Chris Letang was one of those first offensive defensemen. How the Pittsburgh Penguins were built and how they are kind of shifting since then is they were extremely forward heavy and then had some weak goaltenders. But all the money and all the skill was up front. The defense played offense as well. There weren't as many stay-at-home defensemen, but there was a lot more of those offensive defensemen. We've seen this skill kind of be perfected with like Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes, but I believe that it was Chris Letang who started that because of how offensive heavy they needed to be, and he had to jump into the play. Is his style of play different than Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes? Absolutely. But I think that he was the one who started that. So it's been very fun to kind of see how the league has adjusted and where there are other reasons why the league has adjusted to what we see today, with it being so offensive heavy, with it being less physical contact and more skill and speed. Many different reasons for that. But from a Penguin standpoint, the league is now catching up to what they knew in the early 2010s. And the final player I want to highlight is Rusty, or Brian Rust. He is probably one of those players that is not mentioned enough. He is a top-line player. He does consistently play with Crosby. Sometimes he will float down and play with Malkin. Sometimes he can even float down to the third line. Reason why he is notable is because he is that player that you can put anywhere and you can depend on him. And I think he's extremely underrated. You can put him, I think, on any team in any offensive position, and you will see success from him. And I think that is the biggest compliment as a player that you can have. The next team on my list is the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, their fun fact is that they finally beat the Penguins in a playoff series. Sad as a Penguins fan, but looking at it from how hard the Flyers have been working over the past several years, how they've been trying to rebuild, how they have been trying to figure out their team identity, this is a huge win for them. Yes, they got knocked out in the second round, but the Penguins are their rival. I would argue some of the hardest games played in the NHL are between the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Philadelphia Flyers. You are going to see more classic-like hockey. You're going to see those big hits. You feel the energy. Like, the fans are behind it. The fans boo Crosby. They hate Crosby. Crosby loves playing there because he always scores a bunch of goals there. But I digress. So the Philadelphia Flyers that's a huge for them, like I said. And I'll be interested to see how they perform this upcoming season, especially with this new notable player that they recently extended his contract with, and that would be Trevor Zegras. So if you remember from previous episodes, he was on my free agent watch list. He came from the Anaheim Ducks, and just, I would say, exploded, for lack of a better term, with the Philadelphia Flyers. He looks like a completely different player. You can see how comfortable he is, and he just does a lot for the Flyers. He gives them a very recognizable name. He's funny in interviews. He is kind of the whole package, and a player that the Flyers desperately needed. And even better, super young, so he'll be there for a while. Next is a veteran by the name of Sean Couturier. He is kind of like the player that I see going everywhere. I know him more from name recognition, and again, being a Penguins fan, being like, oh, he's out on the ice again. Typically, you're seeing him matched up against some of those more talented players, I would say. And he handles it with grace. He's also a fantastic leader on and off the ice, and he's definitely a player you want to watch. An up-and-coming player, I would say, is Travis Konechny. When I was going through the roster, I'm not going to lie, I struggled a little bit with the Flyers, purely because it is against my Penguins fandom to watch the Flyers outside of them playing the Penguins. So I chose Konechny purely because of name recognition. He is growing in the team, and I think he's definitely going to be one to watch. And then finally, let's talk about Owen Tippett. So, the reason why I brought him up is because he scored the game-winning goal against the Pittsburgh Penguins to clinch a first-round win. And if that isn't just an indication of the performance that the Flyers are putting on, then I don't know what is. I remember watching that game, and sorry, we're going to have a little bit of a story time here. I was watching that game, and my boyfriend, as amazing and awesome as he is, was like, you do know this is going to be Crosby's last game, right? And I was like, no. He has like another year on his contract. Absolutely no way. And I was like, he's going to perform some crazy voodoo magic, and he is going to score a goal. It's going to go to game 7. I mean, the Penguins had absolutely no business being in that race at all. They came 3 games down, won 2 straight rather, looking to win that 3rd game straight to force a game 7 in Pittsburgh. Just devastation. That's all I can say. That's why the pause. I'm just trying to find the right words. It has not been confirmed that this upcoming season is going to be Crosby's last season, but I'm mentally and emotionally preparing for that. And if it is, he has had one hell of a career. And with that nice sob story, let's move on to the Washington Capitals. So the Washington Capitals just barely missed playoffs this year, but they dominated on home ice by really proving the home ice advantage theory by winning 25 home games out of 41. And so, again, Washington Capitals are not a team that I watch very often. I did research to see what a interesting fact would be. I do tune in to them, but oh god, this might get me canceled. A hot take is I am not a big Ovechkin fan. I do have him as my number 1 notable player for the Capitals because he is. I can't deny the stats. I cannot deny the record breaking that he's made. But personally, I watch him play, and he does it all himself. I don't often see him trying to make the players around him better, like we do with Crosby. And that's part of the Crosby-Ovechkin debate that I'm going to do an entire episode on. But yeah, I'm just not a big Alexander Ovechkin fan, but he definitely is a notable player, and I'd be remiss to not mention that. The next player I would say is Tom Wilson. So he is kind of like this classic enforcer that the Washington Capitals have. Not so much now. He has gotten into some trouble with player safety and the rest of the league, but he, in his prime, he was the enforcer. He was the one, he had some very, very controversial hits. I am personally not a fan. Yeah, I don't like the Capitals. I'm sorry. But he had those big hits. He had some crazy hits on Crosby. But he also, with that enforcer energy, is also bringing a skill level that we don't typically see with enforcers. And he's able to play on the same line as Ovechkin and is able to keep up. He's able to help set up Ovi and all. He can be a playmaker. So he's not just a brute. He's also a talented player. So the next two I am not going to lie. When I looked at the roster for this upcoming season with the Washington Capitals, I did not know a lot of names on the team. And that is because, similar to the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Washington Capitals are also starting a rebuild in anticipation of Ovechkin retiring either this upcoming season or in the very, very near future. So the two players that I am going to highlight are actually acquisitions that the Capitals have made, and I'm just really excited to see how they fit. They are name recognition for the teams that they're on, so I'm excited to see what they end up bringing to the Capitals this season. And those two players to watch are going to be Boone Jenner, formerly on the Columbus Blue Jackets, and Jordan Kyrou, formerly on the St. Louis Blues. Speaking of the Columbus Blue Jackets, they celebrated their 25th anniversary in the NHL this year. And that's the only fun fact that I have. They are definitely rebuilding. They made a lot of moves over the off season. They're making moves mid-season. They're going to be a contender soon. And I am so excited to see that. And so the notable players that I have on the Columbus Blue Jackets, I'm going to start off with Charlie Coyle, where he might not seem like a remarkable player. I wanted to note him because he brings a veteran leadership to the Columbus Blue Jackets. For the first several years of Coyle's career, he played for the Minnesota Wild. And this was in like 2014, 2015, 2016 era, maybe even all the way back to 2012, 2013. And if you recognize those years, that was when the rivalry between the Colorado Avalanche and the Minnesota Wild was probably at its height prior to the playoffs this year. So we saw a lot of Charlie Coyle, and he was a pain. He was a pain in the booty. He then left the Minnesota Wild to go to Boston, and he did really well in Boston. He was a standout player there in Boston. And then he came over to the Colorado Avalanche, and I was like, okay, I guess I can't hate this player anymore because he's actually on my team. And when he went to Columbus, I was devastated because he added a lot of value to the Avs. He was a very dependable player. He was very reliable. I believe he was on third line, if my memory serves. And he just gave a veteran presence for some of the younger guys. And I'll get into like all of that when I talk about the Avalanche, but it was tough to see him go, but I'm excited to see where his career takes him in Columbus. The next one is a blockbuster trade from said Colorado Avalanche in Val Nichushkin going to Columbus. So, as an Avalanche fan, I am not upset about this. I I'm not going to share too much into why. I'm going to save that for a different episode. But I hope that this change in scenery is good for Val as a player. He seemed to kind of disappear during playoffs this year, and he just didn't seem like he was performing at his peak that I know he can perform at and that I've seen him perform in. So I'm hoping just being in a new environment is good for him and he is able to perform the way that he is meant to. All right, so this next one is a little silly. So I chose Ivan Provanov, and the reasoning why is, so this player came on my radar purely because his dog has an Instagram page, and his dog is so cute. I believe his Instagram handle is Drake the Pupper or something along those lines, and there were just so many videos of Drake visiting Ivan at practice, and he also used to play for the Flyers. So I used to play this game with myself of, hey, can I name a player on every team in the NHL? And since I didn't watch too many Flyers games, I was like, Ivan Provanov is an easy win for me because I follow his dog on Insta. He's growing as a player. He's still relatively young, but he seems to be liking it in Columbus. He's successful there, so I hope he continues his success. But if you want to follow a cute dog on Instagram, I would definitely go check out his dog. Finally, I need to mention Zach Werenski. He's a standout player. He won the Norris Trophy, beating out Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes, which is just insane, especially considering looking at Cale's performance in the playoffs, looking at Quinn's performance in the playoffs. Obviously, their performance in playoffs do not matter because Norris Trophy is awarded based on regular season performance. So taking the playoffs out of it, it's just, Cale Makar has done so much. Quinn Hughes has done so much. I mean, Quinn Hughes arguably turned the Minnesota Wild from being a maybe contender to advancing to the second round of playoffs. Like, that is insane. But then you look at Zach Werenski's performance with Team USA, you look at his performance just with the Blue Jackets in general, and you're like, no, he's just being overshadowed by those players. But he is such a good player, and he deserves all the recognition that he's receiving. All right, so our next team is the New York Islanders. Now, I'm not going to lie, this is a re-record because I got my Matthews mixed up. So, originally I had said Matthew Barzal is the rookie that just dominated, and that was actually Matthew Schaefer. So, hence why we're doing a re-record. But I thought you guys would enjoy that. Hey, I'm not always perfect. And there are a lot of Matthews in the league. Anyway, so Matthew Schaefer won Rookie of the Year. He was the Calder Trophy winner, and he was definitely a bright spot on the New York Islanders. I looked up the Islanders for a fun fact, and Google did not have anything really to say, just that, hey, this rookie is going to be something. And I agree. I'm very excited to see him grow as a player. I'm so excited to see him start to be in the conversations with Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes and Zach Werenski. It's going to be fun, and I'm really excited to see where he goes. As a reminder, he was drafted number 1 overall in the 2025 NHL draft for the New York Islanders. The other 2 players that I have to mention on this team are Matthew Barzal and Braden Shen. So these are both players that have been around the league for a while, and they definitely make their veteran presence known. And they probably have the most name recognition, and that's coming from somebody who does not watch the New York Islanders unless I absolutely have to, or it's playoffs. So I'm excited. I'm definitely going to watch the Islanders a little bit more this year, because seeing some of the moves they're making during the off season, and just to see Matthew Schaefer grow again in another season, see how he does in his sophomore season, see if he hits a sophomore slump, I'm definitely intrigued. Next, we have the New Jersey Devils. And so they started off hot. They looked like they were going to be a playoff contender. And then something happened, and they ended up not so hot. So where I didn't do a full analysis on the New Jersey Devils, on why they rose so high at the beginning of the season just to fall short of playoffs. That is for next year, when I do a recap of the season to see why teams that started off so hot maybe fell off. But that's my fact for the Devils. So the notable players for the New Jersey Devils are Jack Hughes, who was drafted number 1 overall in the 2019 NHL draft. And then Nico Hischier, who was drafted number 1 overall in the 2017 NHL draft. So those are 2 number 1 drafts, pretty close together within a few years. So why is this significant? Why does it make these players notable? So Hischier, at the time, he was not performing as expected. Turns out that a very common theme that has been going around the NHL is that just because you're drafted number 1 overall does not mean that you're ready to come into the league. Typically, we are seeing the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and sometimes 4th overall players coming directly into the league. And then anybody else who's drafted usually will go play another year of juniors, go play another year, or play a year in the minors, go play another year in college, kind of up to coach's discretion on that. And so the Devils did not improve the way that they anticipated with Nico. So that resulted in drafting Jack Hughes, which, again, did not turn out as expected. Did Hughes have some great moments? Absolutely. And he's had some since. He was getting some criticism because he was not as good as he was predicted to be. And I am chalking that up to just not being ready to be in the league. I would say if I had started this podcast earlier, maybe around the time that Jack Hughes was in his 2nd or 3rd year, or looking at that contract extension, I would probably have a lot of similar things to say about him that I have Connor Bedard. But he has grown. He's really put in the effort, and he's become one of those notable players. Nico Hischier, same thing. It turns out he needed somebody that was on his level to play with. And that watching those 2 work together is, I think, what changed the Devils. It was very hard to see them go from starting off so hot and then not ending hot. A suspicion that I might have for that is Jack Hughes went to the Olympics, and maybe he got tired out and maybe was harboring some injuries. There's some injury problems going on around the league post-playoff or post-Olympics. Maybe that played a factor. Maybe it didn't. Who's to say? The next player is on this list purely because of his last name, and it is Luke Hughes. So, cute little story. Jack Hughes, supposedly, this is all allegedly, asked the New Jersey Devils to draft Luke so that he could play with his younger brother. And I'm going to just say that's canon and that's true. And we're just going to go with that and say that's what he did. And that's how he ended up on the Devils. And it's funny because when it looked like Quinn was going to leave Vancouver because of not having the playoff hope opportunities, again, I digress on that, and we'll dive a little bit more into that when I talk about Quinn Hughes next episode. But there was rumors that he might go to the Devils, and how are they going to make that work? How are they going to have all three Hughes on the same team? And it's funny because people were reacting like, oh my gosh, we're going to have three brothers on the same team. And I was like, you do realize that we've had three brothers, in fact, I believe even four brothers in the league at the same time, and it's the Stahl brothers. But again, I'll let people have their fun. The final player that I'm going to mention is Dougie Hamilton. I recognize him most from his time over in Carolina. He is a fantastic veteran player. He probably doesn't have many more years left in the league, but while he's here, you should check him out. Finally, we have the New York Rangers. So their fun fact is really not that fun at all, and is actually quite sad. So in their first 3 home games, they failed to score a single goal, meaning that they were shut out their first 3 home games of the year. Emphasis on the home games. That's a tough look. Not gonna lie. So hopefully they change some things around this year, and I think with some of these notable players they will. So one of the notable players that I recognize from the Vancouver Canucks, who is relatively new to the team, is JT Miller. And I think he's going to bring a level of leadership. I think that he was not clicking very well with where Vancouver was going, and I'm interested to see how he does with the Rangers this year. Along that same thought, Mika Zibanejad from Minnesota Wild is going back to the Rangers, and that's going to be really exciting. So this gives me the suspicion that potentially he's looking to retire soon, but I think he still has a lot of good years left, but I think it's going to be great for the organization. And then finally, we have a first-round pick by the name of Alexis Lafreniere. I'm so sorry if I butchered that. I even practiced this time before the episode, guys, and I still mess it up. He is just one that I'm keeping an eye on. He was drafted relatively high several years ago. I cannot remember off the top of my head when he was drafted. And he, again, is one of those players that is not performing as well as anticipated by the analysts, which I think is okay. But I think he is slowly getting into where those analysts expected him to be, just on his own timeline, not as fast as they expected him to be. All right, so there is a lot going on in the Metro Division. They are definitely a division to watch, and that wraps up our coverage on the Eastern Conference. Next week, we will dive into the Western Conference, as I alluded to earlier. But until then, let's turn down the lights and talk about this shockingly dark romance by H.D. Carlton. So this week's second period is going to be On Satan's Affair by H.D. Carlton. The plot of this book is a serial killer infiltrates a traveling carnival. I wonder what could go wrong there. How did I consume this book? As always, as what I almost always do on a first read, I eyeball read this book. So let's talk about why you should read. I'm going to be honest. This was one of my first few dark romances I read. And I am a person who likes to read things in order, which is why I am currently doing a reread of A Court of Frost and Starlight. in August, even though it's based during the winter solstice and is my least favorite ACOTAR book. But in preparation for ACOTAR 6, I was like, nope, I gotta read it. I have to do it. Even though, like I said, not my favorite book. And where there are not really any info dumps in either A Court of Frosted Starlight or Satan's Affair, you don't really want to skip, because it does give you some background information for later in the series. So Satan's Affair is the prequel to Haunting Adeline, which is the first book in the Cat and Mouse duology. And if you were to skip this book, I believe that you would be fine. I don't think you will necessarily be confused, but I think the female main character, Sibby, is just beautifully written. She's a fantastic female main character. She'll play a fantastic side character in Hunting Adeline, where she pops up again. But I think the connection that you're getting with FMC and the insight you're getting from her really is setting the site, or sets the scene for this main series, where has obviously, or no, maybe not obviously, because you guys haven't read the book or read the series, or maybe you have, assuming that you haven't, she does have a bigger part in Hunting Adeline. So if you do fall in love with her, you might need to wait to see her, but it does give you a little bit of insight into what's going on in the world, and you get to see a different perspective of a scene that actually happens in Haunting Adeline that you see from an outside perspective, and I think that's very interesting. You also do get to meet the characters of Haunting Adeline. Haunting Adeline. Sorry, I get those mixed up all the time. Haunting Adeline. And I think that just continuity-wise, it fits really well. So, what are my thoughts on this book? First, I want to start out with a trigger warning, so I'm going to read this directly from the book. Warning. This book is extremely dark, with triggering situations such as graphic gore and violence, arousal by murder, mentions of child abuse, psychological torture, suicide, and graphic sexual situations, suited for 18+ readers. Now, when I read that trigger warning list, I was like, okay, this might get intense. Maybe dark romance is really not for me. I definitely took care of myself when reading this book. I made sure that I was in a good mental space, and I actually even created a very small little podcast where I did a little deep dive of Satan's Affair. It is a podcast called Marked by the Villain. It is still on Spotify if you're interested. But that list does include some very triggering things and some very heavy topics. So if you are interested in reading this book, please, please, please send me a DM. You matter, and please, please, please remember, reading is supposed to be fun, and it's not supposed to be triggering. Sometimes the content that we consume can be triggering, and sometimes we think we're in a good headspace and we're not. If anything on those lists, or on the list that I just read, is something you're like, hey, I think I'm in a good headspace now, but I want to see how intense it is, like I said, please reach out. My DMs are open. You can even send me an email and I will respond to you. So, given all of that, would I read it again? Of the entire Haunting Adeline series that I've read, because there is a spin-off book which is part of that same world called Where's Molly, and I have not read that book yet. Would I read Satan's Affair again? Yes. There is a twist at the end of Satan's Affair that I did not see coming, and I loved it. When I was first reading through the book, I originally was looking to give it 2 or 3 stars, meaning that, hey, I liked it. It was like a good thing to pass the time, but I didn't love it. And then I read the last chapter and I am like, holy fucking shit, did that just happen? And I remember, because me and my boyfriend were not living together at the time, I called him and told him, and he's like, okay. I mean, he had no idea what was going on. He's like, okay, yeah, that sounds like a fantastic twist, and was not as enthusiastic as me. But if anything, even if you're struggling to get through the book, even if it is a little too graphic for you, don't feel pressure to read it, but you do get a massive reward in the end if you do finish it. And I think it just sets up what to expect in the cat and mouse duology perfectly. Whew. Yeah, that was dark. And about as dark as I expected it to be. And that was with acknowledging the trigger warnings and not dropping that plot twist at the end of the book, which I alluded to several times. So let's switch gears and have some fun in the third period, shall we? So the inspiration for this week's third period is based off of the most recent Spider-Man movie dropping. So I went to go see this movie last week on August 1st. Yes, I remember the day that I went to go see Spider-Man, brand new day. I dragged my boyfriend along, who does not like superheroes, and I was expecting him, honestly, to give the movie a, 3 out of 10. He ended up giving it a 6.5, which is pretty good for him. He seemed to enjoy it, so that's a plus for me. I promise I am not going to give any spoilers for Brand New Day. This segment has nothing to do with it. It's just inspired by it. Essentially, what I'm going to do is I am going to cast some NHL players as the main superheroes. I did not include Black Widow, who is part of the main Avengers, because, let's be real, any female in the PWHL could easily be Black Widow, so I just skipped over her. They're just that badass. Same with the Scarlet Witch. So I naturally stuck with the male superheroes on this one. Since the Avengers and Marvel have so many spinoffs and so many movies and TV shows, I can't even keep up. The superheroes mentioned do not go past Avengers Endgame. So any of the newer characters, I'm thinking like the newest Avengers movie, I think it's called New Avengers. I personally have not seen it yet because I was like, I need a Marvel break. But there are spoilers up to Spider-Man No Way Home, and that is not necessarily a character spoiler. It is a reason why I chose a character. So, with that being said, let's start off with Captain America. So, I struggled a little bit with Captain America. I'm not going to lie. I ultimately ended up giving it to Jack Hughes, and my reasoning behind it is kind of the perfect reason. And it's because he scored the game-winning goal, also known as the golden goal, to beat Canada in the Olympics in 2026. So I was like, he seems the closest thing that we're going to get to a Captain America in real life. So that's why I would cast him as Captain America. With that being said, I had him a little further down the list, but I think he would make more sense right after Captain America. I'm looking at Falcon. So, in case you need a reminder, Falcon and Captain America are pretty tight. And so, as a result of that relationship, I casted Zach Werenski as Falcon purely because he assisted on the golden goal. So all of that has to go around the Olympics and not necessarily the NHL, but they both play in the NHL, so it works. Next on my list, I have Iron Man, and I casted Jack Eichel for this one. So I was thinking in the league, like, who would embody Iron Man? Iron Man, he's super smart, he's suave, he always dresses right for the occasion, and he makes some tough calls. So I chose Jack Eichel because he reminded me of some of those qualities. He requested a trade out of Buffalo several years ago and went to Vegas and then ended up winning a Stanley Cup with them. It is not an easy decision to request a trade from your team, because say that the team denies your request. If it goes public that you requested a trade from the team, then you might not make the fans very happy, and because they'll take that personally. I think the best example of this is look at what's going on with Dylan Larkin. Look at all the news that I've been sharing on him and the fascination I have hearing the hot takes that I have on Dylan Larkin requesting the trade. Very, very similar for Jack Eichel. His just paid off and he won a cup. So next I have Spider-Man. This one was the first one that I thought of, and I couldn't change it because it was just too perfect. So I casted Cale Makar from the Colorado Avalanche. So why did I choose Cale? When I think of Spider-Man, I think of somebody who's approachable. I think of somebody who is focused when they need to be, but cares fiercely for those around them. I'm thinking somebody who is dedicated to their craft, but not too dedicated. And I'm thinking of who is somebody that if I were to pick in the NHL would most likely be this neighborhood Spider-Man, or this person who he has one job, but then is a masked vigilante at night. And Cale Makar just seemed to hit this. I have a running joke with my boyfriend that Cale Makar can do no wrong, and we call him Sweet Baby Angel Cale as a result. So anytime he gets a penalty, we're like, no, absolutely not. Never my Sweet Baby Angel Cale. So he just kind of fit perfectly for the Spider-Man role. And the Spider-Man that I was thinking of is Tom Holland's version of Spider-Man. If I would have chose Tobey Maguire's or Andrew Garfield, then I would have selected a different player, but this was based off Tom Holland's version. Next, I have Thor, and I chose William Nylander. So why did I choose William Nylander? Well, Thor cares about his looks. And to be honest, Nylander also could have gone in the Iron Man role because they're very similar in that factor. But I just hear girls just crushing on Thor because he's played by Chris Hemsworth, which, I mean, like, fair, he's attractive. But William Nylander just struck me as this person of like, yeah, I would be like a god and not brag too much about it, only brag about it when I need to. It also works perfectly because he also has a brother. So that was unintentional, but turned out working. Next, I have the Hulk. So this one was a little tough because nobody really fits the Hulk. Because when I'm thinking of the Hulk, I'm thinking of who is a enforcer in the league, who is somebody that is causing problems, who's like a hated player on the league. And since I wanted to stay current, I definitely have one for non-current. He actually might do better as a villain, but I digress. I chose Tom Wilson in his prime because similar to how the Hulk was always hulking out and had some anger management issues, as the series moved on, he learned how to control those anger management issues, and I think Tom Wilson illustrates that as well. Next, I have Doctor Strange. So this was another one that was a little tough because not really knowing the personalities outside of interviews is a little tough for this particular one. So I chose Connor McDavid. And it's because he seems to fit personality-wise, meaning that he is constantly anticipating next moves. This is where the No Way Home spoilers are. So, Spider-Man No Way Home, to be clear, if you have not watched this movie, then maybe skip ahead like 30 seconds until you hear me talk about Black Panther. Anyway, so in No Way Home, Doctor Strange is doing a spell for Peter that says everyone is going to forget who Peter is. And this is a direct result of the villain in Far From Home revealing that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And it was causing Peter a lot of problems because he couldn't be just that masked, anonymous vigilante. And as Strange was performing the spell, Peter continued to say like, oh, make sure MJ knows. Oh, make sure Ned knows. Oh, Aunt May should know. And just constantly having like these very, essentially like edits to the spell. Ultimately, this ended up breaking the spell and a multiverse was opened. And, well, we had the events of Spider-Man No Way Home. So, reason why I chose Connor for this is because he strikes me as a person who is going to who would want to know all the outcomes. And that's one of Strange's powers, is he knows all the outcomes and all possible outcomes and risks. And that just seems like something Connor would want to do. And I think that might have played a factor in if he requested a trade from Edmonton earlier. To be clear, he has not requested a trade. There are just some rumors that he is looking to leave the Oilers and go to Toronto. Again, these are not confirmed at all. This is not an official source. This could clearly be clickbait that I'm seeing on Instagram, but if I'm seeing it, you're probably seeing it too. Next, we have Black Panther. So, I chose Seth Jones for this, but probably not for why you're thinking. I chose it because Black Panther is fiercely loyal. And even though Jones has been on 4 different teams, the Predators, the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Blackhawks, and now currently the Panthers, on a quick glance, it looks like it's because he was leaving after contracts and maybe he got a better offer. Now, that doesn't, to me, that is showing loyalty because he's playing out his contract and not requesting a trade or being traded for whatever reason. He's a valued player and he shows his loyalty, but when that contract's up, if he doesn't feel like he is being valued the way that he deserves based off his performance, then he does go look somewhere else. And then finally, this one's a little funny. So I looked at Ant-Man and I chose Brad Marchand about this. And the reason being is he looks so short on the ice. Like, seriously, he looks so small compared to the other players. In reality, he's average height. He's 5'9". That's the same height as my boyfriend. So he's not short by any means or even below average. He is right at average, but he just looks so much smaller on the ice compared to all these players that are 6 foot and change. And I just thought that was a little funny because it was kind of just poking fun at height, and that's been done around the league. All right, my friends, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Plot Twists and Hat Tricks. Since we are a brand new rookie podcast, please rate 5 stars and leave a nice review as it helps other hockey lovers and book enthusiasts find me. As I mentioned earlier, I am active on social media. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at PTHTpod or email me at PTHTpodcast podcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear your thoughts and ideas for future episodes. But until then, remember, you miss 100% of the pages you never read and the shots you never take. Bye, guys.